Hi, this is Dennis, Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a reel that seems to be redundant to the Penn line. It was sent in by Frank. This is the Penn Monofil 27. It's got burgundy side plates. It's a rather narrow frame. It has probably about 200 yards of capacity. And this reel was introduced as a platform to use monofilament when monofilament came out in the late 1950s and replaced the linen line. Before that, we had a reel. This one's been upgraded. We had a reel, the Penn 180 in the Beachmaster series. This one had a plastic spool, and when you loaded the monofilament onto the plastic spool, it had a tendency to warp. And so Penn came out with a reel designed specifically for the pressures that the sidewalls would get when the tighter and more densely bound or wound monofilament line was put on that spool. So basically the only difference between the two, and again this one's been upgraded, this one had a plastic spool, this one went to the metal spool, burgundy side plates, black side plates, a little bit different handle on this one as opposed to the more leveraged one that's on this reel. So Frank sent this in. He asked me to give it a tune-up, and we're going to do that. We'll show you how this reel is made, how you service it, and how you get it out there fishing again. So while I'm taking off the exterior parts, I'd like to thank our first responders. That includes everybody in the medical fields who are currently dealing with the COVID pandemic. We've been dealing with it for a long time now, and the burnout rate is high, and they're putting their all on the line every day to try to keep us safe and healthy and to restore our health for those that are in the hospitals. So thank you for all it is that you do. With special thanks as well to uniformed services, fire, police, rescue, EMTs, first aiders, and to our essential personnel that are delivering our food supplies, providing education with teachers and the like, again going out of their way to try and keep normal whatever normal is. So I'm removing the side plate screws. There's 6 of them on each side. There's 4 long ones and 2 short ones. The short ones go in the reel seat so that they don't protrude. Now I'm looking at this reel, and I've noticed on the inside, and I'll show you it in a moment, that we have the wrong screws in that other side plate. We'll take this off, and you'll notice that I have 2 screws here that are protruding. Those should be short screws. These are long. They may have been replacements, and I'm not sure if I can even find an original screw any longer, but you'll see how it's sticking out. Not a problem unless you have loose line and it somehow wraps around that spool. The screw. We're going to check this in a moment, maybe even do it off camera, but there's a chance that the screws that belong here are on these posts, and when somebody went to fix the reel, they just put the screws in the wrong hole just because they were unaware that they are shorter screws. Okay, the only thing you need to do on servicing this side is to put some grease into the bearing on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I use an artist's brush, and I use a fishing reel grease, and I'm not particular about my fishing reel greases other than they need to be fishing reel greases. In this case I'm using Penn Precision reel grease. It's convenient to me. It comes in a large tub. I use a lot of grease, and that's probably the primary reason why I use that. But I would encourage you, do not use general automotive greases or the like, or lithium greases or that. Just go ahead and use the fishing reel grease. They're not that expensive, and they're designed for fishing reels. Okay, this is what the back of the reel looks like. We're going to actually look this way. We have a bridge, we have our pinion gear, we have a yoke, we have a jack, we have a couple of springs inside, and it all comes apart by taking these 4 screws out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. These screws are different. The screws on the bottom are fully threaded screws, as you can see here. Oops, right there. And the ones on the top are partially threaded. That's because the partially threaded screws up top are made for a slippery ramp, if you will, for the yoke springs. So remember, when you go to reinstall, the partially threaded screws go up top, the fully threaded screws go on the bottom. Also on the bottom of the reel, there is a dog attached to one of those springs. That's your anti-reverse function. And there's a spring that holds the tension onto that clicker. Make sure that as you remove the side plate that you're aware that we have a spring hiding here. And as you go to take that spring out, cup your hand or put it in a plastic bag. I've got that. Put this in a gallon plastic bag, because that spring can shoot, and if it shoots, you're in trouble if you can't find it. So I generally take everything out. I let the bridge fall in the palm of my hand. I've got my hand covering that area so that the spring doesn't jump on me. And then I just lightly remove the exterior pieces. In this case, we have a flat spring. Well, it's flat when it starts. This one's got a bend in it, and you don't need to rebend it out to bend it in. It will keep the tension on the anti-reverse. We have our pinion gear. We have our anti-reverse dog. We have our gear system. The gear system shares the drags and the gears with that other reel. And it also shares the drag system with the Penn 155 Beachmaster, which is the wider frame. So there's 3 versions of the Monofil. There's a 25, 26, and 27. And there's the same amount of versions of the Beachmaster series. And again, one just kind of was built around the idea that your Monofil line was stressing out the spools, and they made a unique design to sell to that marketplace to take care of that. So I'm looking for the pin now on the bridge sleeve. Most of the time you can just push it out with some pressure. Sometimes you need a little assist with a tap hammer. I'm just going to go ahead and grab a little hammer here. I use a pin to center onto the gear sleeve, and this might be off camera and I will apologize, but I just centered the pin, and then I'm knocking that stud through that side plate there, that little pin that holds this in. And then you can either pull that out if you have finger strength. If not, use a little pliers. Go ahead and remove that the rest of the way, so that you can remove the gear sleeve and clean up the post behind it. It's amazing, if you don't service a reel on a regular basis, the greases do find their way into these slots. They dry, and then the gear sleeve cannot easily turn with the dry grease in there, and it bogs down the performance. So what we'll do is we're going to take a light coating of grease. We'll put that back on. Go ahead and put that sleeve over it. Pull that pin back in. Now, if your pin came out all the way, don't worry. Just go ahead and put it back in. Not a big deal. And then give it a spin to make sure that it turns nice and easy. This gear set shares the drag washers. As we mentioned before, not only are the gears shared, but the washers are shared as well. You want to take those washers out. You want to inspect the teeth of the main gear. There's a red hard washer on there. You don't need to remove that. Once you inspect the teeth and you find that the gears are okay, go ahead and put some grease on there. Part of the service is just making sure that the grease, kind of like check the oil and grease, right? It just makes sure that the old grease is removed and the grease is put on there. And that you check the washers, you make sure that they're flexible. These are leather washers. You can continue to use the leather washers. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as they're flexible. If they're breaking, if you're turning them and they're snapping, they're brittle, then what you want to do is replace those. And they have modern day replacements for it. If you find that you're running out of drag pressures, you can go upgrade those to the HT100s that Penn made available for these reels later. All right, we're going to put some grease on that again. Now, these metal washers are clean and they're smooth. If they weren't, you can use some steel wool to go ahead and put them in. The washer with the points, they're called ears. They go in the middle of the stack. You're alternating the leather washer with the metal washer. There's 2 round washers. Those round washers go top and bottom, and that one with the points is called an eared washer, and that one goes in the middle. Okay, then we have the cap washer. So we've just rebuilt the bridge then. Let's just repeat what we did then. We took the gear set off, we removed the gear sleeve, we cleaned the bridge post, we put some lubrication on it, we put the gear sleeve back on, we took the inner workings of the gear for the drag stack out. We found 3 metal washers, 3 fabric washers. The leather washers got a grease on them. I used Cal's Universal Dry Grease, but you can use any regular fishing reel grease if you don't have that. We alternated. We put a leather washer in, then a round washer, leather washer, and then the pointed or eared washer. Last fabric washer or leather washer, we put the round one in, which is called the keyed washer, and then we put the cap on. That's how your stack works. Coming over to this side now, we have a yoke in the assembly. This is called the jack. That's the yoke. I'm going to press down so that we can remove the jack. We have the yoke. We have 2 springs. So this service is about keeping the reel clean. There's some dried grease and some debris in here, so I'm going to use a penetrating oil just to loosen that up, and a paper towel just to wipe the old greases out. There's not much, but dried grease is an enemy of the fishing reels. If you need to get the tight places, use a cotton swab. And get in there and get the rest of that out. And if it gets really particularly tough grease in there, you can use maybe a steel wool or a kitchen scrubby pad or something like that to be a little bit more abrasive and a little bit more in terms of getting the old grease off. Okay, the 2 springs go in those little cavities. This one has a little dry grease on it, so I'm going to go to that steel wool. Do the same thing here. Check the teeth on the pinion gear. Make sure that they're okay. A little grease onto the shoulder of the yoke. Both sides. You can insert the pinion gear. It doesn't matter which side the pinion gear goes in terms of is there a front or a back to the yoke. It doesn't matter. And you can see why I wear that glove. Keep that grease off my hands. When you go to reinstall the pinion gear, the slot faces out. That's going to accept the shoulder from the spool. And we have our jack that gets connected, and it works like that. This is the shoulder of the spool that I was talking about. If you look at your spool, you're going to find 2 squared sides or flat sides here. That's where that gear is going to go. You want to wipe down that spool. Put a little bit of grease onto the shaft of that because we didn't grease the inside of the pinion gear. And then we're going to go ahead and put the bridge on so that we can complete the assembly. When you take the bridge, you're going to insert the bridge from the bottom, and you're going to turn it so that you cover that pinion gear like that. Keep it pressed down. Find a fully threaded screw. That's a bottom screw. That goes in here next. In this case, we have a flat spring. So the flat spring, you're going to insert the dog like this. You're going to look over to make sure that it's against that ratchet underneath here. So it's between that red washer that we put on the other side and the bottom of that gear sleeve. You're going to see that we fill out a cavity now. We have a flat side of the dog, and then we have a slot up here. That's why you'll see that this spring, which has some memory in it, is actually angled, because when you go to install it, you put the bottom on the dog and then you wrap it around that post. And be careful now, this spring gets tension. It's a spring, and if you're not careful, this thing will shoot. Just be careful. We have the spring resting on top here. You see the post, and it might be hard to see because of the way I'm turning my hand, but the rest of the spring is over here. Keep the tension on the bridge as you continue to rotate the bridge around until you see that screw line up with that hole. Once you do that, come over to the other side, tighten the screw, but don't tighten it all the way, just get it started, because you want to make sure that you leave a little bit of play in the bridge. The two screws that are partially threaded go up top. Those springs ride on that. So I go across. I go across from where I am, kind of diagonal. And again, same idea. I don't tighten it down all the way. I want to make sure that all of those screws are started before I tighten down. Come back to the other side, get that one started. Then I go below to the side over here. Once I have the 4 screws in place, now I can go back and kind of reverse course, northeast, southwest, to tighten them down. And once I do that, I want to spin that post just to make sure that that anti-reverse is set, and it is. All right, so we have a collar that goes on next, the referral. This is one of the little differences in this series, that star adjuster is smaller, and you can actually see on the back here the part number is 10-180, and this is the 180. So as I mentioned, a lot of these parts and the reels are shared between them. I'm looking at the spool on this one, and it's a the spool part number is a 100, which is the Surfmaster. So the small chassis Surfmaster shares the spool and the gearing as well. Okay, I'll put the star adjuster on. I don't put the handle on at this part because it gets in the way of doing the reassembly here. And what we'll do is we want to make sure that our gear is in the pre-spool position, so it's pulled in, so that when you go to assemble, it's a little bit easier to square up the reel. And then we're going to take the long screws and get one started in each side. So if you like these kinds of videos, I encourage you to subscribe. And if you do subscribe, please hit the notification button. That way you'll see the reels that I'm posting and when I'm posting them. And you can make a choice as to whether that kind of reel that I'm working on that day is something that you would like to learn more about. I work on all kinds of reels. We're working on a Penn's inshore reel today, but in the future I work on spinning reels, vintage as well as current line spinning reels, and I also work on bait casting reels, round and low profile and the like. It's whatever comes in my shop. You're kind of looking over my shoulder. So if you like to see that kind of stuff, then a subscription with the notifications turned on is the best way to do that. If you have a question on this reel or any reel in particular, if you leave it in the comments section, I do try to respond to the questions left there. And if I know the answer, I'll try to help you along. And if not, I'll try and give you some guidance about where you might be able to turn to get that answer. And just trying to pass my experience on so that I can help you to restore your reels. And as my business is named Second Chance, give your reel a second chance there. Okay, so we've just buttoned all of that up. The next thing to do then, if I didn't put the grease on that shaft, if it was a different service, I would put the oil in there. We have our handle that goes on next. That gets placed in there. And then we have our handle screw. I tighten down the drag so that I don't trap that. And then I'm going to go tighten that up. Now I use an aftermarket wrench, but if you have the Penn wrench, that'll work fine. That just if you have a lot of these Penn reels and you're doing this service all the time, then that aftermarket wrench, it's made by Alan Tanney. You can find its availability on the internet. One of the places you can go for that is mysticparts.com. But if you need a wrench like that for a lot of service opportunities, then it's longer and it's thicker and it's easier to use than the one that came in the box. But if you have the one that came in the box, that'll work fine. Okay, so before we left this reel, I just wanted to make a note. I did put this on the bench. I did check to find out if we had a misplaced screw. We did. So they put the short screw in this crossbar and they put the long screw there. It was a simple matter of removing this one and swapping the position of them. Now we have a properly seated screw that won't catch the line. So here we go. So this is the ultimate test. Is it working fine? It certainly is, spinning nicely. And with that, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. And again, if you want to see more, please subscribe. So please stay safe, stay well, stay watching, and have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.